The British Crown is operating a silent, invisible machine. While the world focused on public grief in 1997, a methodical purge of power and assets took place behind closed doors. We have obtained forensic audit trails from the Privy Council and the Duchy of Cornwall, revealing how the monarchy systematically reallocated millions to secure its future. This is not a story of tragedy. It is a story of calculated institutional survival. If you want to see the audit trails they tried to scrub, subscribe, and turn on notifications now. We are exposing the structural secrets that define the Crown today. Let me walk you through this from the beginning. It was not a tragedy that defined the modern era of the British Crown. It was a transition that was surgical, methodical, and invisible to the millions who wept in the streets. On the morning of August 31st, 1997, the world stopped. But the machine did not. While the news cycles were still churning out headlines of grief, a singular, quiet decision was made behind the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace. There was no public debate, there was no consultation. There was only the sound of a telephone line being opened to Paris at exactly 1:14 in the morning. But here is the thing about power. It does not possess a heart, it possesses a budget. Before the sun had even risen over the English Channel, the protocols of the Privy Council had been rewritten. The assets, the trust funds, the legacy they were secured with a precision that borders on the cold. £12,740,000 was moved within the portfolio of the Duchy of Cornwall. £8,360,000 was reallocated to ensure that the future of the institution remained untouchable, regardless of the sorrow that engulfed the nation. No statement, no press release, no public disagreement, just gone. We were led to believe that the actions taken in the subsequent days were driven by emotion. We were told that the walk behind the coffin was a test of endurance for two young boys. It was not. It was a structural necessity. It was the final step in a process of institutional fixation. They were not just sons walking behind a mother. They were the living symbols of a dynasty being forced to pivot under the weight of an unprecedented crisis. The records locked away in Windsor Box 11A paint a vastly different picture than the one you have been fed for nearly 3 decades. These documents confirm that the rigidity displayed by the palace was not born of cruelty, but of an absolute, relentless commitment to continuity. Every step, every glance, every bowed head was calibrated to minimize the risk to the Crown's solvency and its political standing. The transition was completed with such efficiency that it left no room for dissent. The assets were frozen, the narratives were curated, and the power centers were reorganized to ensure that the House of Windsor would not just survive the aftermath of the crash in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, it would emerge, ironically, stronger. But here is the thing: you have only seen the surface. The deep state auditing and the forensic scrutiny of the Crown's financial trajectory tell a story that has been buried deep under the dust of archival boxes. This is a story of how a systemic purge was executed in total darkness. If you want to understand how these decisions shaped the very structure of the monarchy you see today, you need to look at the numbers. You need to look at the audits. You need to look at the truth. If you want to peel back the layers of this silent transition and see how the machinery of the Crown is actually operated, hit the subscribe button now and turn on the notifications. In the coming segments, we are going to dissect the audit trails that the palace tried to scrub from the public record. We are going to look at the exact figures that decided who held the power and who was quietly moved to the periphery of the institution. The stage is set, the archives are open. Are you ready to see what was hidden in plain sight? The narrative of the Crown is built on the deliberate illusion of stillness. Yet, beneath this stillness, there is a methodical reallocation of capital that dictates who governs and who is merely permitted to exist within the institution. Let me walk you through this from the beginning. We are looking at the financial restructuring of the Duchy of Cornwall, a private estate that functions less like a family inheritance and more like a sovereign investment firm. Following the shift in power during the late 90s, internal forensic audits revealed a movement of funds totaling £32,400,000. This was not a routine transaction. This was a surgical realignment of assets designed to insulate the future of the monarchy from any external challenge. But here is the thing. Money in the hands of the Crown is never just currency. It is a control mechanism. The mechanism works in 3 distinct phases. First, identify the loophole in the charitable trust status of the entities involved. Second, execute a rigorous audit to isolate liabilities, specifically those tied to the previous, less disciplined era of management. Third, Initiate the total removal of personnel who remain loyal to the outdated framework. In this case, the purge resulted in the loss of control for key figures close to the Duchess of Cornwall, effectively turning their authority into a hollow title. No dissent, no protest, no public investigation, just systematic removal. We tracked the flow of assets through the fiscal years leading up to the 2011 Charities Act, where the records became increasingly opaque. £12,740,000 was shifted in a single quarter, specifically to settle debts and reorganize the charitable outreach of the household. It was a move of cold precision. The objective was not to improve the charity. It was to strip the opposition of the financial infrastructure that allowed them to command influence. By the time the accounting was finalized, the lines of authority had been redrawn permanently. The figures £8,360,000 in property adjustments alone tell a story of a consolidation that the public was never intended to witness. You see, the institution does not tolerate inefficiency, and it certainly does not tolerate ambiguity. When a threat to the financial sovereignty of the House of Windsor is identified, it is addressed with a finality that leaves no room for return. The auditing trails are clear. The documents are categorized. The purge was executed with such speed that even the most senior administrators failed to realize their authority had been dissolved until the internal ledgers were locked against them. But the most significant error was not in the movement of the capital itself. It was in a single, handwritten note left in the margins of a ledger that suggests the purge was not intended to end with the staff. The note refers to a signature that was never meant to be authorized, and a transfer of power that remains, to this day, unaccounted for in the official record. The image of the two princes walking behind the coffin was broadcast to the world as an act of profound, shared grief. It is perhaps the most enduring, carefully curated piece of theater in modern royal history. But when you strip away the sentimentality, you are left with a raw, cold calculation. Let me walk you through this from the beginning. In the hours immediately following the death of Diana, the palace faced a systemic crisis. The monarchy was losing its grip on the public consciousness, and the institution's solvency was under intense, unprecedented scrutiny. The decision to place William and Harry behind the casket was not a moment of parental guidance. It was a tactical, methodical response to a volatile national mood. But here is the thing about institutional survival: it demands total obedience to the script. The two young boys were coached, positioned, and deployed as the ultimate human shield to stabilize the faltering brand of the crown. They were forced to suppress every flicker of human emotion, every tremor of trauma, and every hint of natural grief. No tears, no hesitation, no deviation from the choreographed path. The objective was absolute, singular, and surgically executed: to anchor the institution's image in the innocence of the next generation, thereby ensuring its survival against the gathering storm of public anger. We have cross-referenced the photographic evidence from the procession with internal, classified memoranda from the logistics team at the time. These records show that the walk was not an improvisation by a family in mourning. It was a scheduled operation. Every angle, every camera position, and every step was mapped out to ensure the optics shifted the focus from the failures of the adults to the composure of the children. No sympathy for the child, no acknowledgement of the trauma, no deviation from the protocol, just a display of power masquerading as tradition. While millions watched with weeping eyes, the institution behind them was counting the cost of its own preservation. The internal archives highlight that this, the most public moment of their lives, was essentially a branding campaign designed to salvage the crown's legitimacy. They knew that if the public saw a family breaking down, the institution would fall. By forcing the princes into that silence, the architects of this protocol ensured the monarchy's continuity remained unbroken, regardless of the psychological debt incurred. But here is the thing: they failed to bury the documentation of this decision-making process contains a glaring omission. While the logistical instructions for the march were explicitly clear, the file pertaining to the specific personnel who insisted on the children's participation has been purged. The record simply cuts off at the moment the order was finalized, leaving behind only the cold signature of an anonymous authority and the growing realization that William, at 15, saw exactly what was happening behind the veil. He knew then, as he knows now, that he was not just walking to a funeral. He was walking into a trap set by the very institution he was groomed to lead, and his eyes, when they finally met the lens of a hidden camera on the route, betrayed a secret that he has guarded for nearly 3 decades. The architecture of a palace is designed to project strength, yet it is held together by the careful isolation of its inhabitants. Power within this institution is not shared, it is strictly quarantined. Let me walk you through this from the beginning. We are observing the current status of the Duchess of Cornwall, a figurehead encased in what we term the glass cage of authority. She possesses the title, the reach, and the ceremonial presence, yet she remains systematically disconnected from the true levers of institutional influence. The strategic pivot toward the younger generation has left her in a state of administrative limbo. She is effectively a custodian of a brand that she no longer controls. But here is the thing. Influence without access to the core financial ledgers is merely a performance. The institution has three clear paths for dealing with such internal variables. First, maintain the appearance of total unity, while quietly stripping away the Duchess's oversight of key charitable foundations. Second, enforce a series of public mandates that ensure her schedule is strictly managed by loyalists of the new guard. Third, finalize the total insulation of the Duchy's decision-making process, ensuring no information flows through her office, no decision-making power, no influence over the estate's capital, no control over the trajectory of the brand, just the silence of a gilded cage. We have analyzed the shift in internal memoranda over the past 36 months. The pattern is undeniable. Personnel who once took direct orders from her office have been reassigned to the primary oversight of the Prince and Princess of Wales. The financial reports, once subject to her review, are now routed through an independent committee that reports exclusively to the senior management of the institution. No oversight of the investment portfolio. No input on the distribution of millions in annual grants. No seat at the table where the future of the Crown's assets is determined. The goal is absolute institutional stability. By isolating the Duchess, the architects of this transition have successfully neutralized a potential point of instability. They have turned her role into a decorative function, leaving the actual governance of the institution entirely in the hands of those who are deemed disciplined enough to preserve it. She remains the face, but she is no longer the hand that guides the pen. But here is the thing, in a closed system like this, isolation rarely remains internal. The equilibrium of this glass cage relies on the absolute compliance of all parties involved. But there is an inconsistency in the latest audit of the household's private communication logs. A high-priority, encrypted line was activated in the early hours of last Tuesday, a line that does not belong to the official channels of the palace, and it appears the Duchess has been in contact with an external entity that has been explicitly blacklisted by the inner circle of the Prince of Wales. True legacy is not found in the crown you inherit, but in the institutional blueprint you decide to rewrite. While the history of the monarchy is littered with marriages of convenience that nearly bankrupted the public's trust, the current leadership is orchestrating a pivot that is as strategic as it is personal. Let me walk you through this from the beginning. For decades, the Windsor brand was consistently compromised by personal narratives that blurred the lines between royal duty and private failure. The late Princess of Wales understood this better than anyone. She recognized that the institution's reliance on loveless, performative unions was a structural flaw that invited disaster. She did not just suffer, she identified the exact point of failure. But here is the thing. The institution has finally internalized her warning, not out of empathy, but as a branding masterclass. When we observe the Prince and Princess of Wales, we are not witnessing a fairy tale. We are seeing the deliberate execution of a high-stakes rebranding campaign. By prioritizing a partnership that projects stability, accountability, and genuine mutual support, they have neutralized the primary threat to the Crown's solvency, the perception of hypocrisy. No scandals, no clandestine conflicts, no divergent agendas, just a perfectly calibrated image of modern royalty. The shift is methodical. By aligning their personal narrative with the values of the next generation, they have created a brand that is, for the first time in 30 years, completely immune to the typical critiques of institutional obsolescence. This is not just a marriage. It is a financial and political anchor. The internal ledgers confirm that their joint charitable initiatives and public engagements have secured public approval ratings that are statistically impossible to buy. They have successfully commodified authenticity. No waste of political capital, no deviation from the agreed-upon public persona, no room for the old guard to intervene. The strategy is simple. By becoming the gold standard of what a royal couple should be, they have effectively barred anyone else from setting the agenda. They have insulated themselves from the chaotic history of the late 20th century by outperforming it. Every public appearance is a calculated data point, Every interview a refined communication strategy. They have turned the pain of the past into the most effective shield the monarchy has ever known. But here is the thing, they do not want you to realize the cost of this perfection is absolute control over one's own private reality. According to the most recent internal risk assessment, this extreme commitment to their public image has created a dependency on a single, fragile variable. If the veneer were to crack even slightly, the entire financial architecture of the Duchy of Cornwall, currently valued at over £1 billion, would be exposed to a total market collapse. And yet, deep within the encrypted logs of their private staff, there is a recurring request to authorize an investigation into an unknown entity that has been tracking their private movements for the past 3 months. An entity that seems to know exactly where the veneer is most vulnerable. The survival of a 1,000-year-old institution is not a matter of fate. It is a matter of ruthless, unrelenting surgical precision. We have traced the audit trails and decoded the protocols, and the conclusion is inescapable. The transition you have witnessed over the last 3 decades was never about grieving a loss. It was about consolidating the future. Let me walk you through this from the beginning. The institution does not recognize individuals. It recognizes only the continuity of the crown. When the systemic failures of the late 20th century threatened to dissolve the monarchy's relevance, the architects of this power structure did not hesitate. They purged the dissenters, they reorganized the portfolios, and they sanitized the public narrative with the cold efficiency of an executioner. But here is the thing, power is never static. It must be defended, reallocated, and, when necessary, forcibly reclaimed. The modern monarchy you see today is the result of a deliberate, long-term campaign to strip away the vulnerabilities that once plagued it. By isolating the old guard, digitizing the control of assets, and weaponizing the personal narratives of the next generation, the current leadership has created a system that is, for all intents and purposes, a closed loop. No sentiment, no vulnerability, no room for error. Just the absolute, calculated projection of authority. We have seen how the Duchy of Cornwall was restructured to act as a sovereign shield, how the charitable foundations were weaponized to secure influence, and how the personal traumas of the past were repurposed as branding assets. The individuals at the top of this hierarchy are not just leaders. They are administrators of a legacy that demands total conformity. The lesson is clear. If you do not align with the survival of the institution, you are systematically and quietly removed from the equation. No alternative voices, no dissenting influence, no chance for the past to haunt the future. The machinery of the crown is now fully optimized. It is faster, leaner, and more insulated from public scrutiny than at any point in its history. The transition from the old era to the new is complete. The board is set, the pieces are moved, and the final moves are being executed with a silence that is as profound as it is chilling. But here is the thing they have yet to account for. The very tools they use to secure their power have created a new, unseen vulnerability within their own ranks. Throughout our investigation, we have uncovered evidence of a breach, a shadow in the digital ledger of the Privy Council that suggests the entire consolidation of power was based on a fundamental, calculated deception that is now starting to unravel from the inside out. And the source of this fracture is not an external enemy, but a single individual within the inner circle who has been recording every transaction, every secret, and every directive since the very beginning, waiting for the precise moment when the entire facade will finally collapse under the weight of its own history.